Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Emily Summerbell. I am a program manager in OITE. Please just call me Emily. I'm here today to talk to you about creating and presenting posters. I have a sneaking suspicion that almost everyone here today is here because you're presenting a poster at the Summer Poster Days at the end of your summer internship. And we'll be talking about what that actually means. If the slide advancer wants to cooperate. Great. So what is a poster session? You've heard this word, it's a poster day, it's a poster session, but what do you actually do during this time? This is sort of the bread and butter way that scientists like to share their information with each other in large groups. How a poster session normally looks like is you'll see rows and rows of these boards, these large boards with posters stuck on them throughout a conference center or a large meeting space. And each person will be standing in front of their poster talking about what they do. In poster sessions, this isn't like a formal, you walk into a room, you listen to someone speak, you ask questions, the end. Instead, it's more of like a free mingling situation. So you can walk from poster to poster, talk to each person for a few minutes at a time, and see lots of different research over the course of that poster session. And the idea is that some people will want to know more information at the posters, some people will want just a quick overview. So every person you talk to may be asking you different questions and may have different reasons why they're interested in talking to you about your work that you've done this summer. I also want to show that posters are a thing that scientists have kept the same for years and years and years. This is me with my very first scientific poster. Back in undergrad, I was doing a summer internship, much like this, at Emory University. And at the end of that time, I made a poster of what I did that summer. Scientists, we're creatures of habit. We like things to be in the same place and presented in the same way every time. And the poster format is going to look just the same as it did when I was an undergrad as it is now. So yeah, there's me with my summer poster. So why present a poster? It seems like so much work for a summer that you're here to create this giant piece of paper with everything you've done on it. What's the purpose of doing this? Poster sessions serve a really unique role for you as scientists in order to share your findings with the community. It's a great chance not only to share with other scientists, but also other people in the community outside of there, especially for the summer poster day. A lot of you have family and friends in the area. They'll be coming to the poster day as well, and it's your chance to show them what you've done. This is a great way for you to practice your verbal communication skills as well. No matter what career you're going into, if you want to go to grad school, if you want to go to med school, if you want to do something entirely different, does not matter. Knowing how to communicate what you do verbally is one of the most important things you can do to succeed in your career. So starting now with what you do on a summer project is a great way to start. This is another great way, like I mentioned, to present your work to a general audience. So not just scientists, but other people in the community who are not scientists by training. This is really important, learning how to communicate science to different kinds of people. What you tell your PI or like the head of the lab next door to yours is going to be different than what you tell your grandma about your summer project. This is another great time to get feedback. It's always scary asking for feedback and knowing what to ask. So this is a great way to basically have everything that you've done and ask for people for feedback in the moment. So they can tell you, oh, I think these are really cool experiments. You might consider doing this as your next steps. Or, oh, I liked what you did with these methods. Have you tried this other method that my group does? So it's a great chance to learn from other people and get feedback on what you've learned so far and continue that story onto the next steps. It's also a great chance for you to network. Everything that you do here is not just about the science, it is about who you meet. So not just other people in the summer internship program, but other labs, other scientists, other people who you will run into as your career develops over time. This is a great chance to run into people and meet them at a poster session that you may interact with these people later. I have a few examples of this from my time as well. One of them in grad school, I had a poster on, we'll call it my favorite protein, just one very specific, very niche project on a super obscure protein that like nobody was studying. And at the conference that I was at, it just so happened that the one guy who studies this protein was there and was very excited about my poster. So we sat down and talked about my poster for about an hour. And I kept in contact with him throughout grad school and kept in touch with him to ask him feedback on my PhD project as I went through. So just by having a poster at a conference, I ran into someone who was able to help me with my dissertation work later on. Helps establish collaborations later on. During the summer, you won't be collaborating as much immediately, but again, later down the road as your career develops, you'll find that science is a very small world, and the people you meet now, you are likely going to run into them later. And you'll have chances to collaborate with them as your career advances. You can also sometimes find jobs from poster sessions. Not likely from the summer poster session because there are so many people here, but at conferences, if you ever go to a professional conference, there have been times that people have run into potential employers at poster sessions. So there's a few important things to know about poster sessions in general before you start thinking about your individual poster. This is general information for any poster day, and then I will show you specific information for the NIH Summer Poster Day as well. Number one thing, always pay close attention to the directions that the meeting or the symposium gives you. Every meeting is going to have slightly different directions in terms of what they want to see. Could be different size titles, it could be different size posters. Their poster boards may be different from one meeting to the next. So always pay attention to the directions they give you, especially in terms of how big your poster should be. It's never fun to have a poster that is too big to fit on the board that they gave you, or so small that it just doesn't fit proportionally. Different meetings will have either horizontal or vertical poster preferences as well. In general, in the United States, we use horizontal posters. However, Europe in particular really likes vertical posters. So if you ever go to a meeting in another country or in a different scientific specialty, they may use more vertical posters. You also need to find out how your poster is going to be attached at the meeting. Lucky for you, for Summer Poster Day, we are providing push pins, so there will already be push pins there. You don't have to worry about bringing those. Some conferences use push pins, some will have like sticky tack, some will have masking tape. Just find out what they're using to secure posters. And then also know what your display time is when your poster has to go up on the board, and then what your presentation time is, meaning the time that you're standing at your poster. They're not always the same thing. Luckily for Summer Poster Day, they are. So we will tell you, I believe it's a 75-minute block when you're presenting. And once your poster goes up, you just stay at your poster for that 75 minutes and then take your poster down. At a lot of scientific conferences, you may put up your poster a few hours in advance, so people have time to wander around the room of posters and look at them and see which one they want to visit later. But again, you won't have to worry about that this summer. Whatever time we tell you, that's the time you show up, put up your poster, and then you take it down at the end. So specific stuff for Summer Poster Days here. The link is in here. I will also be emailing all of you the slides after this, so you'll have the links too. But on our website, we tell you all the information you need to know about designing your poster. The big important thing here is the size of your poster. We recommend a poster that is 48 inches wide and 36 inches tall. However, if you have a printer that's slightly different in sizes, I think there's one group in Baltimore who their printers only print in 48 inches wide, so they're gonna be that wide. The poster board itself that you're sticking your posters onto is 72 inches wide by 48 inches tall, so 6 feet by 4 feet. So as long as this is not bigger than that, it'll fit. But we know from experience that 4 feet by 3 feet is sort of the standard poster size, and it fits really well on this board. It's not too big, not too small, just in the middle. We use a horizontal layout, so it is longer in length than it is in height. And again, we do have push pins provided, so you do not need to bring push pins with you. Again, know your assigned time for your poster in advance. This is really important for Summer Poster Days because we have so many posters. There's going to be, I believe, 3 or 4 different shifts on each of the days of different groups of people presenting their posters. So you'll need to know not just what day you're presenting, but also the exact time that you're there to make sure you're at the right poster set and time. So let's talk a little bit about making the actual poster. How do you do it? So out of curiosity, raise your hand if this is going to be the very first poster that you've designed. Vast majority, awesome. Raise your hand if you have designed a poster before. Good number, awesome. Yeah, so the good thing is, like I mentioned, the template, sort of what goes into the poster is gonna be the same no matter where you are or what you're doing. So once you learn this sort of format of making a poster, you can apply this advice to any poster. So what is a poster? Ideally, a poster should be 2 things. It should be concise and it should be visually appealing. And it is really an illustration of your research. I like the word illustration here rather than summary, because you really do want to rely on pictures and graphics and ways to show information that's not a wall of text. The other important thing about a poster is that it should catch the attention of people as they're walking by. Like I mentioned in poster sessions during Summer Poster Day, people are going to be wandering through this conference center where there's 150 posters to choose from at the same time. You want to have a poster that will get people's attention, so they stop and they read your title and they look at your graphics. They're like, oh, that's some really interesting project here. I'm going to go talk to that person and learn more about it. And the basics that go into it. It may seem simple, but these are the things that need to be on your poster in order for you to tell a complete story about your research. So you need to tell people what you did. This is a little bit about really the big picture, like why is this project important? Why do people care about what you're doing? What is the connection to society as a whole or to the medical, biomedical field as a whole? People need to know what your project is related to, so they have something to latch onto. People want to know how you did it. So going into the methods, going into what sort of techniques you used, but not going into too much detail about it. Again, why you did your project is really, really important. And what does your work contribute to the broader field? A good way to think about this is that you may not feel like it yet, but I promise you, all of you are now experts in whatever you're working on this summer. And it's weird to think about, but trust me, you know more about this topic than almost everyone coming to the poster session to see your poster. Because of this, you know a lot more details about how the science works, like what the methods are, the kinds of cells or data sets that your group is using. You know more about that technical side than almost everyone coming to visit your poster. And because of that, you have to make sure that people who aren't familiar in your project are able to follow the story. So here's an example of a poster. This is one of my old posters from grad school. And I wanted to show you what a poster may look like. There's a couple of important caveats here. The first one being, this is 5 years of work on my PhD dissertation. This is not the amount of data you're going to have from one summer. Please do not put this much data on one poster. In fact, in hindsight, I'll talk about this a bit more too. There's way too much information on this poster. Looking at the ideals of a concise and visually pleasing poster, I got the visually appealing, if I do say so myself. It's a pretty poster. There's some great pictures on there. It is not concise. There's a lot of words and a lot of data on here. But this is generally what you're going to see when you see a scientific poster is sort of the abstract or background of a project, a bunch of data in the middle, and a little bit of conclusions about what it all means. But the vast majority being that section of data in the middle. So goals for your poster. What should ideally be on your poster? What makes a really well communicated poster? An important thing is having a clear story, having that clarity. It is better to tell a complete story than to have little bits and pieces that don't fit together randomly thrown onto your poster. So it is better to actually have less on your poster than it is to have too much. You want to pick a small number of key points about your project that walk it through a full story, beginning, middle, end, and give enough context for the viewers to follow along, especially if they're not experts in your field. You also want to make sure that your poster is visually interesting and accessible. The accessible part here means a couple different things. One of them is, again, you are an expert in your field. You know what all those long acronyms and fancy jargon words mean. Not everybody's going to know what those mean. So really any acronyms more complicated than about DNA, you need to spell it out on your poster because people will not recognize acronyms if it's not their specific specialty. You'll even, if you meet other people in these research groups, we have everyone doing things from cancer to mosquito research to population health at NIH. There's so many different research topics, and every single field has their own jargon and acronyms that we use. Another point in accessibility, I'll mention this later, avoid red-green color combinations if you can. There are ways to make your poster more friendly for colorblind viewers, and avoiding the red-green combo is a big one. Another important thing to think about when you're making your poster is who is your audience? So in the case of the Summer Poster Day, it is other summer interns, it is PIs and researchers in all of the research groups at NIH, and it's also family and friends in the area who are coming to see your summer posters. So knowing who you're presenting to makes a big difference in terms of what you put on the poster and also how you talk to people about your poster. So this is important to think about too, in that you may have, a PI of a lab next door to you talking to you, and then also say a middle schooler from a local school coming to talk to you. And they're gonna wanna know different information from your poster. One good way to find this out is you can literally ask people, what is their background? Again, it feels really strange the first time to do it, but every time I present a poster, this is what I do. I'll be like, hi, I'm Emily Summerbell, here's my project, blah, blah, blah. What is your scientific background? And if you just ask them that question, they can answer it however they want to. And they'll tell you, oh, I too work in cancer cell motility, or oh, I work in an ecology lab, or oh, I'm someone's family member and I just saw your poster and thought it was interesting because I know about this disorder. So asking people what their scientific background is will allow you to gauge if they're an expert in that subject or not. And that will tell you how much detail to go into when you talk about your poster as well. So when you look at your poster, there's a few things to think about in terms of questions that other people may have about your poster. So what concepts or terms on there will you need to define, because it's not commonly known concepts? What sort of visual aids do you need? What sort of graphics, what sort of tables do you need to summarize your data and tell people what you did? There's a couple of great tools online for making visuals as well. I'll mention this later. BioRender is one of my favorites. It is a great online tool for making schematics. So sort of like those summary pictures of like, here's what I did, here's the outline of an experiment, and making those like big picture diagrams. So big fan of BioRender. You can get a student license for free, and a lot of groups at NIH have like the paid licenses as well. So you can ask your PI about that. Also think about what information do you want people to take home? At the end of the day, if you have lots of little bits and pieces of information put together, people aren't gonna remember that, but they are gonna remember if you tell a cool story. So if you're presenting on, say, my grad school research was in lung cancer invasion and metastasis. And the conclusion of my poster is, this protein that we looked at is controlling cell motility and invasion and metastasis. Here's how we can block it. Here's how this pathway works. That tells them a whole story about what we did, and tying it into lung cancer is bad is a way to get people's attention. It's sort of an unfair leg up for my scientific background in cancer biology, because cancer bad is just always the go-to answer for why do you care about this study. Your reason to care about it is going to be different depending on what you work on. Certain topics are easier to come up with that answer than others, but everything here at NIH is related to human health in one way or another. So I promise you, whatever you were doing, it could be the most basic research of like, what does this protein look like? It still relates to human health in a way that other people will care about it. If you're having trouble coming up with that reason to really like grab people's attention and make them care, talk to your lab members. Everyone else in your research group absolutely has presented posters before, and they'll have advice for you in terms of how to really make your story eye-catching and a story that people will want to hear. So I want to go back to tailoring your poster to different audiences, and something to think about in terms of how you present your information differently. So this is the poster. This is not the same poster I showed earlier. It's a different version of it from a different time in grad school. But what I did is I have the exact same information here that I presented for two very different meetings. So this first one is a national conference for cell biology. So there's a lot more information on here. There's a lot more details, a lot more words. I also presented the same information to a middle school science outreach program. This is something cool called a flipped science fair, where scientists are the ones presenting our research and middle schoolers are the ones judging us on what we did. So in order to win the poster competition, you had to convince the middle schoolers that you had the best story. So how did I do that? If you notice between the two, here's the scientific conference, here's the middle school poster. I took out a lot of information. There are way fewer words on here. I added a few more diagrams of just like, how does this idea work? The one in the top middle there is DNA methylation. It's like, how does DNA methylation work? So more pictures, less words, less data overall. And I changed the title too to make it a much more user-friendly title. So for middle schoolers who don't know all of the big long words that we use in cancer research, this is more approachable for them. So actually designing your poster, getting a little bit into what it'll look like, where everything goes. This is sort of the baseline layout of what you're gonna see in a poster. You'll have your title at the top in a big block in a very large font. Your names and the affiliations of everyone else on your poster are underneath. So this is typically your name first. You're the one who did the most work. You're the one presenting the poster. After that will be other lab members who contributed to your project. So if there's a staff scientist or a postdoc or a postbac who worked on your project with you or mentored you through the summer, their names will go in the middle. And then the very last name on that list is your PI. The PI is what we call the senior author. They're always the last person listed, both in scientific publications and also on posters. Affiliation here refers to what institute you're at. List out your institute, National Cancer Institute, National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease, whatever institute you're in, and make sure you spell it out because people will not know the alphabet soup of all of the different centers and institutes that we have at NIH. So underneath that, you will get into the meat of your poster. You start with an introduction. It's always in the top left corner, and you'll work your way down from top to bottom, left to right. So starting with the introduction, having your goals or your hypothesis clearly spelled out in a separate block in that first column, then get into the methods. The important thing is the methods don't have a lot of space in your poster, so it should not be the entire thing you talk about. And in fact, you don't want to go into too much detail. So enough methods to get people caught up on the basics of your story, but you're not giving them a whole lecture on how to do what you did. In the middle is going to be all of your data and results. So these are the different figures that you produced, and like a short caption explaining what those data are. So small figure legends is sort of summarizing the points and telling people what to look for in those pictures. On the last side, you'll have your conclusions. So tell people, what does it all mean? What is the big picture here? Optionally, you can have a future work section. You don't have to include this on posters, but I always recommend you do. And it's an interesting one to think about for summer projects, because most likely you're not going to be the person continuing this project. Somebody else in the research group will. But it's a really good exercise for you to think about, how would this project continue on to the next steps? What needs to be done to make this a larger scientific project? And even if you go to grad school, you go to med school, and you were in lab for years at a time, your projects are going to be the same way. Even work that you put into a PhD dissertation, whenever you're done with your dissertation, that's not the end of the project. Somebody else in the group is picking up the work after you and continuing on that story. So you are part of that story, part of that pathway of solving the scientific problem. And it's really nice to show how that story is going to continue on past the summer. At the very end, you'll have a little section for acknowledgements. This can be in a much smaller font size. This is for, in particular, if you have any like core facilities who helped process any of your data, run any of your methods, put them in there. Any funding sources, so anything beyond the NIH intramural research funding that your lab may have, that goes in there. Any other people who helped you out with certain parts, you can list them there as well. But this should be a really brief section. So the other parts of a poster, again, you have your title at the top, your authors and affiliations directly beneath it, and then down into the introduction and all of these other parts. What does this layout look like? Where do you see this same list of pieces of information that you may have run into? A paper, yes. This is the exact same information that you put into papers. The only difference here is that it's on one big piece of paper, and it has a lot more pictures than you'll find in an actual research paper, but it's all the same information. So what you're prepping here for a poster is basically what we think about as scientists when we start preparing a paper as well. Another interesting one here, contact information or QR code optional. I've seen it done really well on a few different posters to basically put supplemental information in a QR code. You only have one poster. There's not a lot of information, like not a lot of space on there for a lot of information. So a great way to get supplemental information, or if you have like videos of certain techniques, you can put a QR code in there and send poster viewers to go see that extra information there. Also a good way to link to like the lab's website or like your own LinkedIn page. If you want to do that, you could do that. But basically ways for people to get in contact with you if they have questions or extra supplemental data. Again, totally optional, you do not have to have it, but there are certain circumstances where having a QR code is helpful for that additional information. Don't rely on that alone. The viewer should be able to get your entire story from the poster itself without having to view the QR code. So it's truly just bonus information. We get this question a lot about, do you need a full abstract, or do you just stick with like a summary of the introduction? It really depends on the meeting you're going to. For Summer Poster Day, I highly recommend only having a bullet list of the introduction. Don't write out an entire abstract. So it'd be like a 500-word like block of text. That's too many words. Nobody's gonna wanna stand at your poster and read an entire abstract. If you find ways to summarize what you do in bullet points, that's a much, much better way to get people viewing your poster in a reasonable amount of time and getting the information that they're looking for. So other important things for your poster content. The big thing, number one, is make sure you get your PI's approval for everything going into your poster. This is true no matter where you do research, but especially true at NIH. Since we are part of the federal government, there are rules around presenting the data that you create here. Because all data, all research done here at NIH does not belong to you. It does not belong to the research group. It belongs to NIH. So as such, just make sure your PI approves of anything you're putting onto the poster beforehand. This is particularly sensitive if there's information that hasn't been published. It may lead to a patent. That's the kind of information that PIs will want to withhold until it's fully patented or fully published. But again, talk to them. There's very few circumstances where they'll tell you not to put something on there, but just clear everything with them first before you print the poster. Before you even start with all the details, know what your take-home message is. Again, know that big picture, know why people should care about your project, and keep that in mind as you go through the details of it. So starting with the different parts of the poster, I will admit this is the hardest part of the entire poster for me, is coming up with a title. There's something about taking everything you do and coming up with a very short, succinct sentence that sums that up and is approachable and friendly. This is a hard task to do, and I will fully admit that. So the ideal title should be succinct. It should summarize what you do. The best titles, I think, are a declarative sentence telling you what you did and what it means. But it shouldn't be too long. It should not have abbreviations in it that people won't recognize. And it shouldn't have really complicated jargon words in there either. It should state the main focus of your study. A good rule of thumb is that it should be visible from 6 feet away. So if someone is walking down the aisle, looking at the posters, and they glance over at yours, they can read your title, even if there's people standing in front of you reading the poster up close. Really, the title is what a lot of people are going to use to decide if they want to stop and learn more about your project and talk to you about it. So simply having a good title can really increase the amount of people that you talk to at your poster. So authors and affiliations, again, include the first and last name of you, other people in your research group who helped with this project, and then your PI of your research group. Spell out all affiliations of who is in this project. So anything that is beyond NIH, you should spell out that acronym. NIH is fine, we all recognize that. But even all of the institutes and centers, not everyone is gonna know what all of the letters are going to mean. Don't include street addresses. This, I think, is sort of an old school thing that a lot of posters used to do, but is coming out of fashion for a good reason. You do not need to put the street address. Like, you don't need to put Bethesda, Maryland, blah, 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 all that. You don't need it. You just need the institute name that you're at, and that is enough information in terms of where you are. The affiliations and authors are smaller than the actual font of the title itself. So using a smaller font there, but still needs to be big enough that you can read it from a few feet away. So don't make it a tiny, tiny font. Logos can also be helpful here. I often recommend putting like an NIH logo or an IC logo. If you go to grad school or med school, putting your school's logo in one of the top left or right corners, just so people at larger meetings outside of your institute know where you're coming from. And it's a good way to recognize it. Like, oh, I see another Harvard poster. I see another Howard poster. I see another University of Georgia poster. You recognize those institutes, and that may draw your attention as well. So getting more into the meat of what goes into your poster. The introduction is one of the other parts that's really gonna draw people's attention after the title. This is where you're really justifying what you're doing. Why do people care about it? And sort of what is the big picture of this project? If people don't catch on to the big picture within the first like 30 seconds of reading through your poster, they're not gonna wanna stay and talk about it further. A good way to end your introduction is with a clear statement of the hypothesis of your project, or the specific goals of your research. And I always recommend putting that in like a separate block in the poster itself. You have like an introduction block and then hypothesis and goals blocked off beneath it. The best thing here is to keep it brief. You do not want to put an entire novel of text on here. Walls of text scare people. They don't want to stand and read. They want to listen to you talk about the poster more than they want to read. Using pictures and diagrams is also a great idea. So for example, if there's like a signaling pathway or a particular method that you use that's easier for you to explain with a picture than words, 100% I recommend using pictures then. You may still need some words, like a short figure legend explaining the picture, but if you can use one picture and a short figure legend instead of a paragraph, fantastic. That is a great way to share what you did. And bullet points are your friend. Avoid paragraphs at all costs. Find as many ways as possible to use bullet points rather than like full sentences or full paragraphs. So same thing with the methods. The key thing here with the methods is the more that someone is an expert in your topic, the more they'll be interested in the methods, but they will ask you when they want those details. Assume that less details in the methods is better than more. And I know this is hard because especially when you're just starting a new project, this is the part that you're the most confident in. It's like, you know how to do these assays, you know how this worked, and you want to show off all of these awesome methods that you've now learned. However, this is the part that most people actually care the least about on a poster, which is wild to think about. You've spent so much time optimizing this and getting everything to work. But people don't want to know the details of how you did it. They want to know why you did it. So getting to the results and really what you have done with those methods is more important than spending a lot of time on the methods. And if they want those details, they will ask you. In your data and results, only have your key figures here. It is okay not to present every single piece of data that you produce this summer. In fact, it's often better to pick and choose some of the data that makes a whole research story, beginning, middle, and end of what you did, rather than sticking everything onto the same poster. Ideally, figures should have a title that summarizes what they do. So a good way to do this is instead of just having figure 1 and then a picture, instead of the title figure 1, give it a sentence title, much like you did the poster itself. So saying like protein XYZ does this in these cell types, have a sentence that summarizes the findings. I use the same tip when presenting research in like a PowerPoint format. Having titles on your slides that summarize what the slide actually says is a great way for people to keep following along. As we all know in seminars, it's very easy to zone out for a minute. And if you just zone out for 30 seconds and then come back to it, you may be lost entirely if you missed a key piece of information. So by summarizing all of that in the title of that figure or the title of that slide, if people happen to zone out for a bit and then come back to attention, they can keep up with what you're talking about and find the main purpose of that piece of information there. And again, all the text should still be visible from several feet away. This is hard to do, especially like when you get into like legends on figures and stuff. You're gonna have to go smaller for figure legends and access labels and all that. But still, it should be a reasonable font size so that you don't have to get 6 inches away from the poster in order to read what it says. There are ways to test this. I will also email you directions after this of how to print out just part of your poster to scale and see how big the font is or how a picture looks. So you can tell if it is too big or too small. Remember as well, ideally your poster should make sense even if you're not there standing at it talking about your poster. For summer poster day, you will be there the whole time, but whenever you go to professional conferences, very commonly you'll put up your poster several hours in advance of when you actually stand there. So if people are wandering around looking at posters without you there, they should still be able to get an idea of what you did and what your poster means. Conclusions. After you show all of the beautiful data that you have, you're going to want to sum it all up again. I know you're thinking, we just went over big picture. That was like the whole first part of this talk was like, big picture, why do we care? You want to go back to the big picture again. Coming back to that of like the reason why people care, what do these results mean for what your lab does? What do these results mean for the field that we're in? Having a way to really summarize that and make it relatable to people will grab their attention again. This is another great place for more pictures. I am a huge fan of as many diagrams and schematics as you can use that make sense. So if you have a way to summarize your conclusions using a schematic, fantastic, do that. And big picture, again, less is more. I'll keep repeating that over and over and over, less is more. Do not put too much onto your poster, or it's just overwhelming to look at so much information all at the same time. Again, things that are optional that you can also include on your poster. The future work. So again, where is your project going after this? Even if you're not the one doing that research, it's really nice knowing what's going to happen next in the story and how the next people in your research group are going to tackle that problem. Use bullet points when going through your future work. You can keep it pretty brief. Generally, like 3 suggestions of future ideas is a good amount to have. So like 3 bullet points, here's what some next steps might be. That's a good amount of future work. Acknowledgements, again, optional. You can keep them very brief and they'll be in that bottom right corner. And then references. You don't have to have references to papers on your poster. And if you do, you can put them in very small font size. This is the one exception where the font can be really small and you get up close to read it, because 99% of people who come to your poster are not going to care about what papers you cited in your background information. So unless it's like a really key paper, like this is the method we're using, it came from this research group, here's what they did. The references are not the most important thing here. People want to know about your work. They don't want to know about the references from other groups. So if they are there, you can include them, but you can make them very small and at the very end of the poster. Reminder again, because this is super important, is that publishing data has implications for intellectual property. The NIH is very protective of its own data. We want to make sure that all data presented from NIH research groups is data that should be presented. So just make sure you talk to your PI before you print the poster and they give you the okay, everything that is on here is allowed to be on the poster. Again, shouldn't be a problem for the vast majority of projects, but always check your PI first. So that's a lot of information about what goes into the poster. It's the content of it. It's another important factor, which is making your poster pretty. You want to make it visually appealing and put things in places that make sense to read through in a short amount of time. Another big one is just how do you make a poster? What are you using to make it? My number 1 recommendation is PowerPoint. It is very easy to make posters through PowerPoint. Again, I will send you these slides as well with directions on how to do this. But you will open a new PowerPoint file, and in the design tab, there's an option to set the slide size. This is where you'll set the size of the slide to the size of your final poster. So you can choose that option and then tell it you want it to be like 48 inches by 36 inches, or whatever size you're printing at. And the whole slide itself will now be at that size. This is really, really, really important, especially for scaling up pictures. When you print it, the file itself needs to be at the same size as the final poster, because if you have a really small PowerPoint file and try to make a big PowerPoint, all of your images are going to be super grainy and blown out when you try to make them enlarged. So making sure that the pictures look okay at the correct size from the beginning will solve that problem for you. So when actually designing your poster, there's a few things to keep in mind as well in terms of how to make it look visually appealing and make it really an effective way to communicate your science. Biggest one, planning ahead. I will admit as well, this is not something I am always good at. I am a procrastinator, always have been. It's not my proudest trait, but that is who I am. But a poster should not wait to the last minute. The reason why is not only are you trying to get all this information together from your own project, you also need the input of your PI. So making sure that they have time to see it and review your poster. Also, very importantly, you need to print the poster. There's 900-ish or so summer interns who are all going to be printing summer posters at the same time. We physically don't have the capacity to print 900 posters in a day. So making sure that this is done in advance is a really, really important thing so that you're not rushing at the last minute and actually have your poster in time for poster day. Again, remember the size of the poster. We recommend 4 feet by 3 feet. but know the size that you're printing and what printer you're using, know the dimensions that it's restricted by. 36 inches tall is pretty standard for the height of a poster because most poster printers, that's the max dimension that they can print to. Some can do 42 inches, some can do 48, but in general, 36 inches tall is the dimension that's limiting the size of your poster. Remember to simplify the language. In fact, I recommend having people read over your poster who are not in your research group. People in your research group, yes, they absolutely need to look at it, help you decide what data goes in there, how you present it, but have other summer interns and other groups look at your poster. If they tell you, hey, that word is confusing, or I don't know what that concept means, consider taking it out or simplifying it or changing how you present it in a way that makes sense to them. So just have someone who's not in your research group look over your poster and let you know if something doesn't make sense. A good way to keep everything neat and organized on a poster as well is to keep everything snapped together on a grid. PowerPoint as well will have a default, like items will shift together. When you are arranging objects, you can have them aligned to like the left side or the center. Using those buttons to automatically align things is great. And you can also put on sort of the ghost grid lines on top of your poster while you're working on it, or at least while you're aligning parts to make sure that everything visually lines up on a grid. So I highly recommend using those grid lines when you get to the rearranging parts, part of designing your poster. Margins are another really important thing to think about here. In this last bullet point here also may seem wild, but about 20% of your poster should be empty space. Only about 40% of it should be the pictures, the graphics, the schematics that you have. 20% is text, that's it. And another 20% of your poster is blank space. Where does this blank space go? This is the white space, this is margins around all of the individual sections. And again, this is preventing you from having a wall of text that's too much to process all at the same time. So instead, leaving gaps between each section, between your intro and your methods, between the different figures that you're showing. You leave that white gap in between them, it will visually separate the information and people will be able to follow you step by step through your poster more easily. So this is sort of an example of like, where does the white space go? In this poster template here, the teal bar at top is where your title and affiliations go. The white boxes are where your actual information would go, your text, your pictures, all of that. The gray bars here is where the blank space should be. And in fact, I would even include more blank space horizontally between different sections. But we basically consider those like no compete zones, like nothing should be in that section. So here's another slightly different example. Instead of 4 columns, this has like a larger middle section. I see this layout a lot with more data science focused projects that have like really big plots. You have like a UMAP or these other like big data representations that don't fit in a narrow column. You may have like a big center panel for certain big pieces of information, and then the smaller panel underneath and the smaller panel on the right side for data pieces that do fit in that smaller size. So depending on what you're doing, certain kinds of information are best shown like this with just a big central block. If you do use a layout like this, make sure that whatever's in that center block is like the most important data, because that will draw people's attention because it's the biggest block. And don't crowd it. If you have a block that big, putting too much information in there, again, it's very overwhelming to look at all at the same time. Hierarchy is another way of basically organizing the information in a way that makes sense when you look at it. This means that you have certain pieces of like fonts, certain pieces of text in larger sizes than others. So titles are always bigger than the information underneath. The bullet points underneath are always larger than the figure legends. So you can change the size of the font, you can change the position of the font, just indenting something, or putting another like sub bullet point shows people it's an idea underneath another one. And you can change the color as well, but be really careful with playing with color on posters, both as well of keeping in mind colorblind people who may be looking at your poster, and also because not all printers are the same. So what it looks like on your computer screen may not print quite the same in real life. But it is always a great idea to separate your fonts, separate your text by having bullet points, by having certain fonts larger than the others for big ideas, smaller font for the smaller ideas. And you can use bolding, you can use underlining sparingly, don't put it all over the place, but making certain pieces in bold will draw people's attention to it. So like one thing I like to do is in my hypothesis statement or the summary of what I'm doing, just the keywords, I'll highlight those in bold to draw people's attention to that even quicker. This is just another example of what it will look like on your poster, but now with these sections in there. So the introduction to the beginning, goals and methods in the same first column there, all of your data in the middle. This is yet another way to have just one big block. And then another data section on the right in your conclusions. Again, I would only use this for certain kinds of information. It's better to have smaller chunks of data rather than one big one, but there may be certain scenarios where this makes sense for what you're doing. What kind of fonts do you use? Sans serif fonts are by far and away more common on posters than serif fonts. So this is like Arial, Calibri, Helvetica. These are the fonts you'll see mostly on scientific posters, but you can use the classics like Times New Roman if you really want to. That is fine. The other important thing is only use one font for your entire poster. So whatever your title is in, whatever your legends are in, use the same font for the whole poster to make it visually cohesive. And absolutely whatever you do, do not use Comic Sans. Do not use all the decorative fonts like that. Just Comic Sans in particular, I cannot take Comic Sans seriously. Yeah, be careful of the font you choose. It's best to stick to the boring fonts like Helvetica or Arial. You want your science to stand out, not your font. So if you have to draw people's attention with the font, that should not be the most important thing that you're presenting to them. So here's what these different sizes of fonts look like. It's gonna look absolutely massive on a PowerPoint because this is not a physical poster, but these are the sizes of fonts that we recommend for your poster. So the title should be in about 80 point font. Section headings 54. If you have smaller secondary headings or certain just figure legends, put those in 44. General text 36 to 40, figured labels and captions in 28. This, you'll play around with it as well. Once you start making your poster in that PowerPoint file that's at the correct size, you'll see better what this looks like. But these are font sizes that would be large enough for people to read from far away, but still let you get the information on the poster that you need. Again, one font per poster. Do not use multiple fonts. It may be a distracting thing to see multiple fonts on there, so keep the font simple. If you have different levels of information, you can separate those with hierarchies. So having certain parts of the font in bold. You can capitalize the titles of your figure legends and of your poster in title case, but avoid all caps. All caps is just hard to read without sounding like it's yelling at you. So just don't use all caps if you can avoid it. Better to use title case. Keep in mind the size and the color of the font as well as the other pictures. Color is another interesting one to think about because you can use a little bit of color as sort of like an accent to the poster, but not too much, just a little bit of subtle color. The most common is blue. You'll see a lot of like navy blue title heads and maybe like a blue border around certain boxes. But it's really just a small splash of color. It should not be the main focus of it. I saw a really nice poster at Postback Poster Day this year that used like an eggplant purple. Looked very good. I recommend that one as well. So again, color, use it sparingly. Just use it for like the title of your poster itself, or accent bars, like the actual title captions over the different sections can be in color. But the best design to have for your poster is to keep it simple. So we recommend using a black text on a white background. Which again, it's not as fun as like really colorful posters, but it's going to be so much easier for people to be able to read it and take in your science rather than taking in just the design of the poster. Simplifying the design really is there so that your science is what's going to shine through. So yeah, black, dark gray, dark blue, all of those are common font colors. I always just stick with basic black font. And very light background. So white or like an absolute pastel blue or pastel gray, whatever color you're using is fine, but keep it really, really light. I like using white backgrounds because figures that have blank space around them, if you have part of a figure that you put onto a colorful background but don't subtract out the white, you'll then see this weird white box wherever your figures show up. So by just using a plain white background, that way if you put figures on there with white background in figures, it blends into the rest of the background and you don't have to worry about having those odd looking blocks. Use solid color fills in the background. This one's super important. Try to avoid using gradients and absolutely do not use an image as the background behind your poster. It looks really cool in theory. In practice, it's very visually overstimulating to see a whole picture behind your poster. And I'll have an example of that in a minute too. Yeah, so here's an example in the top left. This is good. Like plain navy blue, section separated, plain white background with navy blue or black font on there. In the top right, it's a bright yellow background. This color is way too aggressive for a poster. If you have a very bright background like this, again, that's what's gonna pull people's attention rather than your science itself. The poster in the bottom left here with the red is also a very bright color. So I would not recommend using colors that bright. If you use like a dark, like maroon, like dark jewel tone colors, those look really good because they're muted and it gives you a good contrast of dark color to light color. Whereas anything in the middle, like that red or that yellow, there's not enough contrast between it to read what's on the poster easily from a distance. And then in the bottom right, as beautiful as that is, having a DNA double helix in the background, it is too much to look at visually that distracts from the content of the poster. When you're saving your images and using them in your files, it's always important to make sure that they're going to show up cleanly in your final PowerPoint file. All of your images need to be saved at the highest resolution that you can get. This is important as well. Images from the internet are often at much lower resolutions than you need in order to print them largely. So be careful with images if you take like a background figure from like a paper that your lab has published or something like that. Be careful and make sure that the resolution is high enough that it looks good when you print it out. There's different kinds of files you can save images as well. In terms of quality, the TIFF images always are going to look the best, followed by PNG, followed by JPEGs. JPEG images do not scale up and down well. They get really blurry once you try to get them big enough. So try to avoid JPEGs if you can. Using TIFFs and PNGs, the file sizes are bigger, but your actual pictures are gonna look much prettier. So stick with those if you can. Also make sure not to stretch out pictures in weird dimensions. It's really easy to do when trying to get things to fit. Like, oh, I'll just make it a little bit longer or a little bit taller. But once the proportions are off, it just doesn't look right. So just keep the same rectangular proportions as you scale things up and down. Don't squish them to make them fit. Posters are big. They're really big. You don't realize it till you print out your first 3 foot by 4 foot piece of paper and you're like, this is a massive poster. You can test print parts of your poster on a regular printer on 8.5 by 11 paper just to see what it looks like. Again, this is kind of a complicated process, so I will email these directions to you all, and you can do this on your own time. But through PowerPoint or through Adobe Acrobat, there's ways that you can print out just parts of the poster to test them before you print the whole thing. Logos, again, always nice to have like an NIH logo or your IC logo somewhere on your poster in the top corner. But you do need to treat these carefully like you do all the other pictures. So that you don't stretch them or distort them. People don't like when you mess with their logo art. They spend a very long time designing really good logos. So whatever dimensions, whatever proportions of the logo is in, do not squish those or stretch those. Leave those in the same proportions. Also make sure you do leave margins around logos and other pictures. So same thing with text, you want to leave white space between logos and your title of your poster. You don't want them squished up right on top of each other. And this really helps just visually separate the parts of the poster. Vector art is the way to go. So if you find a file that's saved in a vector art format and in a single color, that's going to look the best on your poster. So like a plain white font or black font logo on the header of your poster. So I want to revisit a poster that I showed you earlier of what the old version of it looks like to what the new version looks like. So this is the first poster I showed you with an overwhelming amount of stuff on it. Again, this is 5 years of work. Do not put this much information on your poster. This is too much. I actually went back and redid this poster recently while getting ready for this talk to really think about, okay, if I take my own advice and improve my poster, what would it look like? And this is what I came up with for version 2. Does anyone want to tell me what looks different between version 1 and version 2? What are some things you notice?
Use bullet points instead of the large.
I use bullet points instead of big blocks of text, yes. What else? Yes,
The color, there's a white background and then there's blue.
yes, exactly. So I had a blue gradient back here. I changed that to just a plain white background.
More space.
There is more space. That is the big one, is I included more margin space in between the pieces of information. Anything else you noticed? Yes.
Concise writing.
Concise writing. This, I think, was the biggest thing for me, was I just had too much information. So I went in and took out a lot of my introduction, a lot of that bits of text, and just really simplified it down to what do you actually need for the poster. So yeah, here's what I did. I got rid of the whole block of text that was the abstract, and I made it just a bullet point of the intro, reduced the amount of text on there, add more white space in between everything. And I added little thin borders around each section of the poster just to visually separate those. Optional to you if you have those like lines around each block, but I like it just to visually separate all of the individual components. And it got rid of data because less is more. I wanted to tell one whole complete story without having too much on one poster. Getting into some quick tips about how to present your poster, and then we'll talk about how you print your poster. We actually have a couple folks from the medical arts branch here to tell you about how you print your poster at NIH. If you go through medical arts, like what needs to go into that file as well. So printing your poster, this is only part of the process of designing it and making the poster. Another huge part of it is talking to people at your poster itself. Like I mentioned, people are going to be wandering through the poster hall, looking at different posters, and they'll stop by for a few minutes at a time to see what you're presenting on. The best presentations are not reading off of your poster, it's summarizing the information that they need to know and telling a story with it. So this is where practicing comes in handy. Practicing how you talk about your poster, how you present it to people. Absolutely make sure you practice with your research group in advance. Practice with other summer interns, practice with other fellows here at NIH. People love to practice posters with each other. It's a good way to make sure that it makes sense to other people. Also make sure that you present your information enthusiastically. This is a big one. People can really tell if you're excited about your project or if you're not. Even if you're not excited about every part of your poster, find those pieces you are excited about and emphasize that. Just being excited to talk about your poster will make people want to talk to you more. If you stand there and talk and just look bored the whole time, nobody's going to be interested in your story. So be excited about what you're doing. You have done some awesome stuff here at NIH this summer. You want to show it off. Now is your time to get excited about it. Another good way to think about telling a story while going through your poster is what we call the hourglass method. So you start with the big picture intro. So for me, it being in a cancer biology background, cancer bad. That's my big picture. Then you work your way down into more of the fine details. So how do things work? What are some of the methods? What does some of the specific data say? And then at the end of your poster, you have to back off again and go back to the big picture. So big picture conclusions, remind people why they care about it, what this project means in terms of what the scientific field does and what society knows about this topic. So start with big picture, work into some of the details, and then end with the big picture again. So tips for how to present your poster well. Be prepared, practice in advance. This is so big, just make sure you practice with other people in terms of how you talk about your poster. You will feel so much more comfortable if you just talk it through a couple times beforehand. Doesn't have to be extensive practice. It could be just like once with your lab members, great, awesome. But just make sure you practice at least once before the poster day so you're comfortable with what is on the poster and you know what's on there and can talk about it to other people. Do not read from the poster. This is a big one as well. You need to be familiar enough with what you're talking about so that you don't have to read it verbatim off of the poster. People are much more engaged if you're talking to them without reading the text from it. Also remember your audience. Remember that you are allowed to ask people what their scientific background is, and that will help you decide how much detail to go into. Listen to people when they ask you questions. I've noticed this. I've not only presented lots of posters, I have judged lots and lots of posters over the years. You can tell the people who are really good at their posters are those who listen to your questions and answer what you're actually asking, rather than just assuming, oh, I know this piece of information, I'll stick this in instead. One of the best ways to respond to questions is if you don't know what the answer is, that is fully acceptable. You're allowed to tell people, that is a great question. Thank you for asking it. I don't know what the answer is to that, but I will look into that and get back to you later. That is a great response to give to people. We know a lot of things in science. None of us are experts in everything. There's absolutely no way you're going to know the answer to every single question that people ask you. Even as, PIs of groups, postdocs, research scientists have been here for years, they're not going to know 100% of the questions that people ask them. So same for you, it is okay to admit when you don't know a piece of information. And again, optional, you can use a QR code to have bonus information if people want to look into more details later. So I want to show this list of common poster mistakes as well. This list here actually came from posters at NIH. Alexis Sherling, one of our awesome OITE staff members, went through all of the comments from the judges at the post-bac poster day earlier this year, where all of the post-bacs are presenting their research, and went through and categorized all of the different comments and feedback that we had from the judges and found the most common responses from those judges. And this is what we saw. The first two in particular, about 10% of the judges' responses mentioned one or both of those points up there. So either having too much text or like what looks like a wall of text rather than bullet points, or not connecting the project to the big picture. So the fact that 10% of judges commented on those two during the post-bac poster day tells you that this is a really common thing we see, but also a really easy thing for you to fix now by thinking about what's going into your poster. More pictures. We need more pictures and less words. So if you find ways to get in more graphics, especially for complex ideas, it's a great way to present your information. Another mistake is if graphs are not labeled properly. So you need to include graphs, but also make sure that your axis labels are correct. You have the right units on there. You have a brief legend to tell people what the graph actually is. So making sure that the data is there, but it's readable. And another big mistake with labeling graphs is the font size is way too small on the axes. I've seen this so many times where it's a beautiful poster, but then the font on the axis looks like it's about 6-point font, and you just can't see what the data actually is. What are the units? What are the measurements here? You can't see it if it's too small of a font. Another common problem is people skipping over the introduction or background. So again, looping back to the big picture, make sure you tell people the background of your project. If there's any information that's important to know before getting into your part of the project, make sure to tell people that. Too much jargon and too many acronyms that are not spelled out is another common mistake. So again, remember that you are the expert in this topic, and assume that a lot of people coming to your poster are not experts in that topic. They're not going to know what that really long protein name or that really long protocol acronym is going to mean. And again, too much data on your poster and not enough white space. One of the best posters I've seen was at post-bac poster day last year. So about a year and a half ago or so. And it was a post-bac who started just 2 or 3 months before the poster day. And she actually didn't have any data. It was a fully, here's what I'm going to do. And talking about her plans for her research, going through the background and the big picture and then her plans for it. And it was so well done because she had just enough information on the poster. It was not too much. She was able to talk through a whole story. And it was remarkable because she didn't actually have any data on that poster. That's sort of an exception. You should have at least some data on yours, ideally. But it's just interesting to think about that you can really effectively communicate your ideas without a lot of data in it. Another important thing to know is we have poster feedback sessions. So these are sessions on Zoom where you can drop in and talk with OITE staff about your posters, get feedback on what it looks like. If you want to be like, hey, I think I had too much words in here, but I don't know how to summarize things better. Come talk to us. We will help you make your poster look nice. And also give you feedback on just how you present it. So if you're, uncomfortable in terms of how you're talking about your background, you want to just practice part of it, great. We'll happily run through, parts of your poster with you to make sure you're comfortable with it. These are the dates and times. We will email all of these dates, times, Zoom links, all of that as well. So you will have this information, but put these on your calendar and stop by one if you'd like to and get some feedback on your poster. So information for printing your poster. I'll give just a couple quick tips here, and then we'll hear from the folks at Medical Arts. So one important thing is when you're printing your actual poster, it needs to be in a PDF format, not in the PowerPoint slide itself. This is the brief overview of how you get to that option, that you go to the Microsoft Print to PDF option. You're going to tell it to print as a full page slide in high quality. And don't click select to fit to paper, because then you're gonna have this itty bitty poster in a really big piece of paper and it's gonna look very strange. So these are just the options you pick when you physically print the poster. And we'll send this to you as well so that you have the directions of what to click when you're printing that file as a PDF. It's also a good idea to embed your fonts into the files, that if someone opens a PDF on a computer and they don't have the font that you had, it'll still look correct. And those directions will be in there as well that we email to you. So where do you physically print your poster? First place you should go is ask your PI. Your research group has absolutely printed posters before you, and there is likely a printer that you can use for free, or that can be charged to the lab funds through what's called a CAN number. So that basically goes straight through the lab funds, and you don't have to worry about paying for a poster out of pocket. So talk to your lab members, talk to your PI, they'll know the good printers to use. Certain ICs have their own printers, you can use just the IC's printer. If your IC does not have a printer, you don't have one in your building, there are a couple different places as well. The Clinical Center Information Technology Center can print, and also the NIH Medical Arts branch. This is one of the great places to go to get your poster actually physically printed. They'll be answering questions as well. I'm gonna give them a quick shout out as well, that it's really important that you get your poster printed early. So start thinking about your timeline now. I highly recommend printing at least a week before August 1st. So think about your timeline backwards. So if you want it printed by August 1st, make sure you give a few days before that. Print by, I believe, July 25th is the week before. Leave a few days for your PI to look over your poster and do edits with you. Back that up, add a couple days for adding in your results, adding in your methods. If you give like 1 day to each piece of information on the poster, you can chip away at this in little pieces at a time. So like your background information, hypothesis and methods, you should be able to fill all of that out now without having all of your data yet. So as you get closer to time, you'll have your last bits of data, you finished up the whole story, but there are certain parts that you can do now so that you don't have to design the whole poster the day that you have to print it. Don't do that, it's incredibly stressful. So I'm gonna turn it over to Woody, who is with Medical Arts. I'm going to spotlight you. Stop sharing this briefly.
Great job, by the way. I've been listening in the whole time, so great presentation.
Right here.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I can. We cannot see you in the room. I'm trying to fix that. There we go. Yay.
By the way, great job on the presentation. I've been sitting in since the start, so very sage advice. So any questions on working with medical arts? We are part of the Office of Research Services, and we are a fee for service. So if you do come to us, or if you use our website, you'll need a CAN, which is a common accounting number. Your supervisor or AO should know what that is. And our normal turnaround is 3 working days, but we do have an option for a rush charge. So the team lead for our production department is on here as well, India Taylor. So Emily mentioned get your posters in early. That would help a lot. We have 2 materials that we can print on, paper that's think of it like a thick photo paper. It has a slight pebbly texture and it's glossy, and we can also print on cloth. A lot of people like cloth because you can fold it and you can't quite put it in your pocket, but it'll fit in a manila envelope so you can transport it easily. Let's see. We also offer on our website a proof. And what that means is we will take your poster and we'll print out, I don't know, 11 by 17. So you can see like a little mini version of it, see if the colors look right, see if the pictures look okay. To me, I think that's kind of a waste of time and money. If you're worried about how it's going to come out, you know, we can look at the file for you before we print it. Rule of thumb, if you look at it on your monitor at 100%, that's pretty much what it's going to look like when you print it. So if you see one of your images and it's, you know, pixelated and blurry and doesn't look sharp, then it's not going to print that way. So let's see what else.
Where are you located, Woody?
Oh, we are in building 10. The easiest way to get to us is go through the south entrance and go past the Magnuson auditorium. And the first set of elevators you get to, they'll have these sort of old 30s style, like bas relief, pewter looking doors. Go down to the second floor, B2. And then once you get in the elevator lobby, there'll be a wall that's painted blue and you'll see medical arts above the door, and just, you know, follow your way. Can't miss us.
Yeah, if you get to the FAS coffee shop, you've gone too far. Back up to the elevators before that coffee shop. While we have Woody and India here, does anyone have questions about how to print your poster? Where do you go? How do you submit files? Any of those great details? If you are in the room, you can use the microphone on the floor so that folks online can hear you. And if you are online, you can type your questions into the Q&A, and I'll be going through those as well. We have someone who says, hi, I'm at the NCI Shady Grove campus. There's a printer on one of our floors. Can I just print there? Absolutely. If you have a printer in your building, and it's a printer that anyone in your department or your branch is free to use, great. That is a fantastic place to print. So yes, if you have a printer at NCI Shady Grove, use that printer.
Talkative group.
I've got a lot of people here today.
Yeah, I see that. How many posters do you think you'll have for this event?
Alexis, do you have the numbers and how many we're expecting? It's gonna be a few hundred. That's like 700-800 posters, I think.
I just finished counting everything. We have almost 800 posters.
Wow.
Nice.
Amazing.
We'll be ready for you.
Fantastic, thank you.
So,
And I'll send you all the information for medical arts as well, so how to get in touch with them, how to submit your file online through their portal. That will all be in the email we send after this.
so I passed along to Emily a sort of a one-pager on how to convert your PowerPoint. I know some of you have Macintosh computers and you may have used Keynote. I don't have a one-pager on that, so you can contact one of us at Medical Arts, and we can walk you through the process. Or in the meantime, I can try to use my Mac at home.
Also, why saving as a PDF is your best option, because PDFs will work the same on Macs and PC.
Yep.
I'm going to start going through questions in the chat here. Again, if you have any questions in the room, please just use the mic on the floor. Also, Alexis had a good point in the chat as well. Some of the ICs are hosting their own poster day in addition to the full NIH poster day on August 1st and 2nd. So if your IC is having their own poster day, also make sure to talk to your summer coordinator, find out those dates and times, where does that need to be, and plan printing your poster whatever the date of that poster session is. So if it's before the full NAH Summer Poster Day, make sure that your poster is printed in time for that IC presentation. Let's see.
See, India has her hand raised.
Oh, great. India, are you able to unmute yourself?
So I wasn't here from the beginning, so I did want to just jump in really quickly. You basically cover all the bases already, but one of the things I did not hear is your text. Maybe it was mentioned, but your text having at least half-inch border all the way around. So you don't want your text or your images or your logos to extend all the way to the edge of the paper. So if your poster is 24 by 36, your text needs to be within a 20 by 34 box within the 24 by 36, so that when we go to print your poster, we don't trim off your letters. Okay. Also, I wasn't sure if anybody spoke about the logos that you
Specifically on logos. So if you do use NH logos, like use the vector art format, not just a pure image of it. And single color logos are the best.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, it's a great reminder as well. With that, the amount of white space on your poster, that absolutely needs to include the edges of your poster, because the printer may not print exactly to that size. You may lose a little bit of information if you have text or pictures up against the edge of the paper. So yeah, that half-inch border around every edge of the poster is a great reminder. Let's see. Someone asked, would you recommend transferring Google Slides files to PowerPoint and then using the directions for printing? I have not made posters on Google Slides before. If someone else has advice on it, fantastic. I recommend just using PowerPoint to design the whole thing, because it is a fairly easy process there. And we know that converting from PowerPoint to PDF will go smoothly. If other people in your research group have done it on Google Slides before, great. Just make sure to talk to them. And if you do on the Google Slides, leave enough time so that you can play around with it and make sure everything looks correct in the PDF file before you print it. So just leave a little extra time. For citing the poster in your CV or resume, do you include what it was about and where it was presented? Or is there some standard of writing this? Ooh, that's a good question. So typically in a CV or resume, when you list a poster presentation, you'll have like your name, the title of the poster, and then the actual meeting title that you presented at. So, your name of your poster, NA Summer Poster Days. You can add in the dates as well. Some people may choose to put in the location, not totally necessary, but just like the title of it, what the meeting name was, and the dates of those meetings, the information. You do not need to add an explanation of what that poster was about, because you'll find as you present more and more posters in your career, it'll take up way too much space in your CV. So really just the title. It's another cool question. What if I'm not really doing research? I'm in a position at NIH where I'm doing more IT related work. Cool. I work on tickets the IT team gives me. How do I present this research in a poster format? So the person who asked this, that is a great question. Come to one of the summer poster day feedback sessions as well to talk about it. But there should be ways to basically tell a story about what you're doing. So if you don't have like a research hypothesis, what was the goals for your work this summer? What were you doing? What were you learning? And what does your work do for NIH as a whole? So that's sort of how I would pitch it, is turn what you did this summer into a story, and sort of how what you did relates to NIH as a whole. And if you have questions about that as well, feel free to reach out to us. We can talk to you about strategies for planning a poster. Other questions in the room? Awesome. I'm gonna hang out here for a few more minutes if you have anything, so feel free to come up and talk to me. All of the links to stuff that I talked about today will be sent to you as well. If you have any questions about your poster, absolutely reach out to us. We are happy to talk to you about it. You can email me directly, emily.summerbell@nih.gov, or email the SIT email address, and someone from the SIT team will get back to you. Yeah, we are very excited to see your posters, so I hope you were excited to present it as well. Thank you for coming today.